what's happening? My name's Joe, and welcome to part 2 of my collection room tour. Now, if you haven't seen part 1 yet, I invite you to go back and check out that video. I went over all the artwork along that wall, everything in my IKEA detolfs, and I lamented over the closing of Toys R Us. Today I'm going to tell you about everything on the wall and the shelf behind me. Before I get started, if you have a collection of comic books, artwork, or action figures, then you definitely need to get some blinds, and you might want to look into getting some curtains too. Because sunlight is not good for collectibles. In fact, right now I'm in the process of repainting this Terry Dodson style DC Direct Wonder Woman figure that I bought really cheap at a local comic book shop because her paint was badly damaged from exposure to sunlight. I recommend getting some blackout curtains. Even though they're more expensive, it really keeps the room a lot cooler. It helps when you're watching movies, playing video games, or trying to take a nap during the day, and most importantly is it protects your collection. And now with that out of the way, I think I'm going to start in the top left-hand corner and work my way down and across. So let's get started. Cheers. First off, in the corner up top is a corkboard with a bunch of modern Star Wars figures on vintage-style card backs. I like having them tacked onto the corkboard like this because I put fewer holes in my wall this way. I've got them all in star cases that I bought from a website called Collector Warehouse. The star cases keep the dust off and they keep the card backs pristine. These vintage original trilogy collection and vintage collection figures are pretty much the only things in my collection that I want to keep mint on card, and that's only because I either have doubles of these or have better versions of the same figures loose. First off, we have the Imperial Naval Commander, R5-D4, Luke Skywalker in X-Wing fighter pilot gear, Luke Skywalker in Hoth outfit, there's Bossk the Bounty Hunter, Princess Leia in her Hoth outfit, and moving down we have Han Solo in Endor trench coat, Wedge Antilles, and Admiral Akbar. I think I forgot to mention it last time, but here in the corner is a mini Star Wars poster that came with a 4-pack of Star Wars action figures, and I just happened to have a mat that would fit it. Next we have a signed She-Hulk print by Greg Horn that I picked up at a local comic book convention several years ago. This image was used for one of the covers of Dan Slott's She-Hulk run, which cemented me as a fan of the character and of Dan Slott's writing. I think this was the only She-Hulk print that Greg Horn had at the convention, and it just so happens to be one of my favorite covers that he illustrated. Hopefully you can see the signature to the right of Galactus' head there. If you haven't read any She-Hulk comics, then I would highly recommend Dan Slott's run. Jennifer Walters gets kicked out of the Avengers Mansion because she's partying too hard and inviting over random hookups. She starts working for a new law firm that practices superhuman law, and she actually uses old Marvel comics approved by the Comics Code as precedent in her cases, because if they were approved by the Comics Code, then technically they're official government documents. It's really, really funny. And if you're a Deadpool fan, I think you should check out John Byrne's Sensational She-Hulk. John Byrne had She-Hulk going on lots of crazy adventures, teaming up with different characters, and breaking the fourth wall way back in the 80s. In fact, there's one issue where She-Hulk grabs another character by the ear, drags him out of a panel, across a page of phony ads, and into the next page. So like I said, if you're a fan of the modern Deadpool stuff, you'd probably really enjoy Sensational She-Hulk. Next up is my Matty Collector DC Universe style comic book Watchmen figures. Now, I did a video review of my entire Watchmen collection, including these figures, a few months ago when Zack Snyder's Justice League movie came out and Doomsday Clock was kicking off. So you can check that video out if you're interested in getting a closer look at these figures. And these are Mattel figures, so their articulation leaves a lot to be desired. You can't really do very much with these except have them standing around like they're waiting on a bus. However, I do think they look really nice, and I like their overall aesthetic better than the upcoming DC Collectibles Doomsday Clock figures. I doubt that I'm going to pick up any of the Doomsday Clock figures, even if DC Collectibles doesn't cancel them, because I already have these. I probably would have picked up the Mime and Marionette figures if they were single-carded, or if they came in a 2-pack together. But splitting them up into 2-packs with other characters that I already have means that I'm probably going to pass on them. Right below my comic book style Watchmen figures is a drawing I did of the animated series style Batman, Poison Ivy, Harley Quinn, and Robin. I did this with colored pencils, and I think it's pretty fun. I used to have a Green Arrow print signed by Neil Adams in this space. When I put this diorama on the shelf below it, it covered up the Neil Adams signature, so I had to rearrange things a bit. Down on the shelf in the corner here is a Play Arts Kai variant Thor figure that I bought from the Elite Comics booth at Planet Comic Con a few years ago. And this was right after the price for these Play Arts Kai figures jumped up to $150. I got this figure for $75, and I told my wife that it would have been irresponsible for me not to buy it at half price. I really don't like having him buried in the corner like this, but I don't have any better place to put him right now. I was originally going to put him on top of one of my Detolf cabinets, but unfortunately, if you have this figure above eye level, you can see straight through his diaphragm joint and into his chest. So he has to be on a lower shelf like this. All around him are some custom lightning bolts that I made out of twisty ties that toys and action figures come packed in. Basically, I just wind them together into lightning bolt shapes, then I dip them into white Plastidip, and when that's dry, I dip them into blue tinted clear Plastidip. So these custom lightning bolts are posable, they're pretty fun to put together, and it's a good use of hundreds of twisty ties that I wind up with. Next to him is a Bowen Galactus bust that I bought really cheap at a local comic book shop because the box was missing. Eventually I plan on putting him in the back of a display of Fantastic Four action figures. Next up is the Tantive 4 Blockade Runner diorama that I made for my 3 3/4 inch Star Wars action figures to recreate the opening scene from Star Wars A New Hope. The floor and walls are made out of insulation styrofoam covered with sticky back foam sheets, and the control panels on the back wall are small tiles of foam core board. To the left are some different droids you see on the Blockade Runner. Then I have some various stormtroopers, the Power of the Jedi and Vintage Collection Rebel Fleet Troopers. There's the old Power of the Force 2, C-3PO and R2-D2. And I don't mind some of these older Power of the Force 2 figures because they're cheap and easy to find, and you can put them in the back of a diorama like this where their flaws are less noticeable. Then to the right we have Princess Leia giving the stolen data tapes to R2-D2. He might be a little hard to see, but there's a Darth Vader figure on the other side of the door waiting for the stormtroopers to clear the hallway. Right below that is a print of the Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles crossover issue number 2 cover signed by the artist Freddie Williams II. A friend of mine works at a local TV station, and they interviewed Freddie Williams II for a segment on their show. While he was there, my friend Mike got a signed print for himself, and he got a signed print for me also. That's really special to me because I absolutely love Freddie Williams' artwork, and I think this Batman Turtles crossover series is one of the best modern Batman comics since the Court of Owls story arc. Next is a Wolverine Weapon X drawing that I did with Copic markers, mechanical pencils, and ink. So Wolverine is eviscerating the soldier on the left, and he sliced the machine gun the other soldier's carrying. Then there's the Weapon X helmet on the ground between his feet, and a couple of big-ass wolves behind him. So maybe he's going to have to fight them next, or maybe they've accepted him in their pack and they're going to back him up. I drew these 2 gnarly trees with branches that spell out the word weapon, and then there's 2 beams of light, either from lookout towers or maybe a couple of helicopters, to make this big X in the center. I thought I made the Weapon X thing pretty obvious, but some people who have seen this don't realize it until it's pointed out to them. I'm no Barry Windsor Smith by any means, but I like the way this turned out. Next is a drawing of Furiosa from Mad Max Fury Road. I think I nailed the likenesses on Charlize Theron, Immortan Joe, and Nux the Warboy. Maybe not so much on Tom Hardy though. Up above the window are some autographed 8x10s. The first one is Michael Biehn, who played Kyle Reese in The Terminator and Corporal Hicks in Aliens, among other things. And I got this at a local horror convention called Crypticon. Then we have a signed photo of Peter Mayhew, who played Chewbacca in the original Star Wars trilogy and parts of The Force Awakens. I'm not sure if he was in Revenge of the Sith or not because I hate the prequel trilogy. And I'm not sure about The Last Jedi either. I know he's got some health issues, so he may have passed the torch completely by now. Anyways, he's a very gracious, super nice guy, and I got a selfie with him one time too. Next we have my first 2 autographs from Firefly cast members. On the left is Adam Baldwin, who played Jane on Firefly, and on the right is Jewel Staite, who played Kaylee. Now, of course, Adam Baldwin was in Full Metal Jacket, Independence Day, that TV show Chuck, and a bunch of other really cool things. He was really funny and seemed pretty friendly. Jewel Staite wasn't rude or shitty by any means, but she just didn't seem quite as friendly as most other people who I've gotten autographs from. Next we have an 8x10 autographed by Zach Galligan, who played Billy in the Gremlins movies. I got this autograph at Crypticon also. I think this was the same year I got Michael Biehn's autograph. He was really nice, and I absolutely love the original Gremlins movie. And next up, we have my autographed photo of the late, great Adam West. I got that signed at Planet Comic-Con, I think in the early 2000s, because I was in college at the time. I have a video on my channel about the day I got this that I recorded after Adam West passed away, and I'm pretty proud of it. It's kind of a shorter one, so you can check that out if you want to. Adam West was just as sharp and quick-witted in person as he seems like on television, and it was really cool to meet him. Finally, we have my Pam Grier autograph. I'm a massive Tarantino fan, and I don't hear people talk about Jackie Brown as much as most of his other movies. But it's right up there with Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, and Kill Bill in my book. I had a big crush on Pam Grier for a long time after I saw Jackie Brown, and she was cool as fuck when I got this autograph. Moving back down to the shelf below the window, here's a custom Land of the Jawas / Purchase of the Droids diorama. The base that all these figures are standing on is a slab of insulation styrofoam, and the sandcrawler is completely built from scratch. The nose is heavy cardstock, taped to 2 small cardboard boxes, and the detail parts are sticky back foam sheets and bits and pieces of a model tank and HO scale rail cars that I got from a box of fodder parts at a yard sale. I believe there are only 2 official Sandcrawler toys. The first one came out in the 70s and was remote controlled, and the second one is the original Trilogy Collection Sandcrawler that was just a rehash of the vintage Kenner version. I modeled my custom Sandcrawler after them as far as scale goes, but I took some creative license with the details. On the side here is an escape pod and a Power of the Force 2 electronic R2-D2 with a small diorama piece and a Jawa blasting him. Then we have a bunch of different Jawa figures from different lines. Some of these Jawas came together in 2-packs, and some of the 30th Anniversary Collection and Legacy Collection Jawas included these larger droids. And this is back when Star Wars figures were super fun to collect. This yellow droid here is a custom that I made. This is a modern power droid that I repainted to look like the vintage one. In the front we have an Uncle Owen Lars figure from a comic book 2-pack with C-3PO, R2-D2, R5-D4, and Luke Skywalker. It's hard to see, but I have a bunch of figures inside the Sandcrawler too. There are some extra Build-A-Droid parts, some prequel and Clone Wars droids, a vintage 8D8 figure with a paint wash to make him look dirty, a repainted Death Star droid, and I have some animated style Clone Wars Jawas that I bought to use as filler for my dioramas. And I'm pretty happy with the way this display has turned out. Next to that is the Toys R Us exclusive Legacy Collection Lars Homestead playset. I think these originally retailed for $60. The Toys R Us closest to me had about 15 or 20 of these collecting dust for the better part of 2 years, before they finally got marked down to a price that I was willing to pay, which was $20. The base of this playset is more akin to packing material than an actual playset. It's very, very thin plastic, and this igloo part isn't much better. It's basically just a plastic shell. This set came with a static Womp Rat figure, repacked Power of the Force 2, Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, a repacked moisture evaporator, and a super articulated sand trooper. There's really no reason for this set to have ever cost more than $20 or $25 max. Here's a super articulated vintage original trilogy collection Farm Boy Luke staring off into the distance. And here are a few sand troopers hot on the trail of the missing droids, ready to light up the Lars homestead. This is my Death Star briefing display with Admiral Motti, Darth Vader, and Governor Tarkin. The figure to the left of Admiral Motti there is a Captain Needa figure whose head I swapped with a Rebel Fleet Trooper. And the 2 figures on the sides came in comic book 2-packs. They originally had on green uniforms, so I repainted them gray to make them look like regular Imperial officers. The base is a plastic tray, and the table is an oval-shaped cardboard container from an arts and crafts supply store, painted black. The centerpiece is just some random bit from my fodder bin, and I didn't bother to make chairs for these guys because 1, I was lazy, and 2, some of these figures aren't really capable of sitting anyway because they don't have articulated knees. Next up is my Bespin Dual diorama that I made out of insulation styrofoam with sticky back sheets to cover the walls and fodder bits glued on. The big busted window in the back was a lid for a carry-out pasta container, and I tried to make it look like the moment where Darth Vader is using the Force to bombard Luke and push him out the window. Most of these pieces of debris are random bits from my fodder bin. I glued one onto a blast effect that clips onto Luke's lightsaber, and I used a black twisty tie to pose Vader's cape as if it's blowing in the wind from the pressure change. Next is a display that I put together recently, but I might change this around a little because I'm not super happy with it right now. This is the Target exclusive Star Wars Legacy Collection Battle of Carkoon Battle Pack. This set came with a repacked Power of the Force 2 Weequay figure, and Han Solo, Lando Calrissian, Jedi Luke, and Boba Fett figures that were reissued from the black-carded Saga Collection line that had rounded bubble blister cards. Most of the figures that came in this set had ridiculously poor paint apps, so I swapped them out for better painted versions. The skiff is a slightly retooled reuse of the original vintage Kenner skiff, and the Sarlacc pit is the only piece that was all new for this set. There's actually another part to the Sarlacc pit. It's like a sand-colored, thin plastic shell that fits over the Sarlacc pit, and it's big enough that the skiff could actually sit on top of it, so it looks like it's hovering above the pit like in the movie. But the shell is too large to fit on my shelf here, and it's so thin and cheap that it won't support the weight of the skiff and the figures. I still have it, and eventually I'm going to try and reinforce it so it will hold up the skiff, and I can use it for display. I put these skiff and sail barge guards around the pit because they're all such awesome looking figures, and up until recently I had them packed away in plastic bins, so I'm happy to finally have them out where I can enjoy them. In case you're wondering, the answer is no. I'm not signed up to buy the HasLab Katana sail barge vehicle. I have a few issues with it. I don't really care for the crowdfunding route that Hasbro's taken with this. It feels like they're giving fans and collectors an ultimatum, and the whole thing smacks of Mattel's Matty Collector website to me. I think the sail barge is a little overpriced too. I would be more inclined to buy it if it was around $300. I believe that it would have been 100% funded in about half the time if Hasbro had made the sail barge available to collectors worldwide, instead of just North America. It blows my mind why they won't sell it internationally. Finally, the main reason why I have to pass is because the thing is just too freaking big, and I have no idea where I'd even display it. That's the same reason why I don't have the big Millennium Falcon, and why my X-Wing and AT-AT are still in storage. I'd have to display it on my kitchen table, and my wife wouldn't go for that. Either way, it's a win-win for Hasbro. If it gets funded, they make a lot of money from it, and they have a lot of collectors on their dick. And if it doesn't get funded, Hasbro has an excuse for never producing big, movie-accurate, collector-oriented vehicles and playsets ever again. Every time it comes up in a panel, they can say, well, we tried to give you collectors the sail barge you said you wanted, but not enough of you put your money where your mouth is, so you only have yourselves to blame. And furthermore, from now on, we don't want to hear any more bitching and moaning about Death Stars, Sandcrawlers, or any other big vehicles or playsets, because you guys won't buy them. This kind of ultimatum from Hasbro really hurts the collector community. I think a lot of times these crowdfunding things make collectors turn on each other. You have people on forums who are like, you must not be a true fan if you don't plop down $500 to back the barge. Or, you poor people are dragging down the hobby. Maybe you shouldn't collect anything if you can't afford to back the barge. I get that brick and mortar stores don't want to commit the shelf space to something this expensive and this big, but I think that Hasbro could sell this internationally, online, and still make collectors happy and turn a profit. So I apologize for the rant there. In full disclosure, I started this video days ago. Between work and the Easter holiday weekend, it's taken me a long time to record and edit. Since I started recording this video, the sail barge is now 100% funded. And I'm happy for all the fans out there who are able to afford it and have the space to display it. I think it looks amazing, and if money and display space were of no concern for me, I definitely would have pre-ordered one too. Moving back up to the top here is another corkboard with vintage, original trilogy collection, and vintage collection Star Wars figures. From top to bottom, we have Greedo, the Rebel Fleet Trooper, and Death Star Escape Luke Skywalker. Then we have Dagobah Landing Luke Skywalker, which is a personal favorite of mine, Bespin Lando Calrissian, and Boba Fett. Then on the very bottom row is Princess Leia in the Slave Girl bikini. That is the only vintage collection Slave Leia that I've ever seen in person, and I'm really thankful to have it. Then we have the Imperial Biker Scout and Nien Nunb. Right below that corkboard is the NECA San Diego Comic-Con 2017 exclusive Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles box set that came in the vinyl carrying case that was made to replicate the action figure carrying cases you might have had when you were a kid. I recorded a really long, in-depth review of all these figures and their accessories that I invite you to check out after you finish this video. I had some quality control issues with this set, so I made an update video to my original review after NECA sent me a replacement part. That was a little frustrating at first, but the people at NECA took care of the issue, and now I'm really pleased with this set. I didn't realize it at the time I recorded my review, but a lot of other collectors had problems with the way that the eyes on the turtles were painted. Thankfully that was not an issue for me. The eyes on my turtles all look very nice and straight. On top we have Donatello, Raphael, Leonardo, and Michelangelo, and right below them is a foot soldier, Shredder, Krang and his walker, and another foot soldier. As far as the sculpt and paint details go, these are the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles figures that I've always wanted. Shredder and the foot soldiers all look amazing. I would have preferred Krang and his android body over this walker, but he's still pretty solid. And I think it would be really cool to add Bebop and Rocksteady to this collection eventually also. The shelves these figures are standing on came from Target, and I think they come in a 2-pack for around $20. They're fairly inexpensive, and they look decent enough. Tucked away in this corner here is one of the only vintage pieces in my collection room. This is a 14 or 15 inch Batman Returns figure that I got for my birthday in 1992. I guess money was pretty tight because that was the only thing I got for my birthday that year, and I was always really careful with him. This figure only has 2 points of articulation, so you can't really do much with him besides stand it on a shelf and look at it. This figure is in pristine condition. He doesn't have any scratches or scuffs on him, and that's why he makes it into the collection room. In front of him is a big-ass Hot Wheels die-cast monster truck Batmobile. I think these are a pretty good value for your money. They're big and fairly well made. The body is die-cast metal. The tires are made of soft rubbery plastic. And I think I only paid $6 or $7 for this too. I'm a sucker for the big, yellow, oval-style bat symbol, and the design for this body puts me in mind of the 1989 Batmobile, which is my favorite Batmobile of all time. This is a signed Harley Quinn print by Joseph Michael Linsner that I bought at Planet Comic-Con here in Kansas City in 2017. He didn't have a huge selection of prints with him, and this was the only one with Harley that had more characters than just Harley Quinn on it. I bet this was used for a variant comic book cover because of the blank space at the top. In the center is my Green Arrow print signed by Neal Adams. Neal Adams has been to Planet Comic-Con for several years in a row. I bought this the first year he came. Neal Adams is a legend. Nobody else does dynamic, forced perspective as effectively as him, and I think he will go down in history as one of the all-time greatest comic book illustrators. Neal Adams knows this, and charges an arm and a leg just for his signature. The first year I saw him at Planet Comic-Con, he was charging $20 per signature. So I thought it was a better deal to buy a print like this, because at least I'm getting something new. This year at Planet Comic-Con 2018, I heard Neal Adams was charging $50 for his signature, and his booth was like a ghost town most of the weekend. If you absolutely wanted a comic book or a trade paperback or some hardcover collection signed by Neal Adams, you'd be better off going to nealadamsstore.com. Even if it's a book you already own, you'd save money, time, and energy buying a signed copy of it from Neal Adams' website than to take your copy and pay for him to sign it at a convention. Finally, on the right side is a signed She-Hulk print by Amanda Conner. I know Amanda Conner is more well known for Harley Quinn and Power Girl, but when I saw that she had this She-Hulk print available, I couldn't resist. I imagine this was used for a comic book cover as well because of the big empty space at the top. I've gotten a bunch of things signed by Amanda Conner over a couple of different conventions. She's really cool and funny and seems like a genuinely nice person. And I think it's neat to see her take on not only She-Hulk and Iron Man, but all these other Marvel characters cheering in the background. Here we have my old coffee table and a Samsung Smart TV that isn't smart anymore. It must have had a lobotomy. As soon as the warranty ran out, the part that connects to the internet broke. So now it's just going to be a downstairs TV for watching movies and playing video games. As soon as my wife and I redo the main room in the basement, this TV and table are going in there. Until then, they're staying in here. And the table is like the on-deck circle for new toys in my collection and things I plan to review. Most of these comics are ones I had signed at Planet Comic-Con in February, and I meant to do a review about them, but I skipped over these to do reviews of the Walgreens exclusive Mr. Fantastic and my budget Okoye Build-A-Figure from the Black Panther movie. I really enjoy doing Comic-Con haul review videos, but they take a while to do, and not that many people watch them anyway. So while I've got you here, I'll try to go through these quickly. First off is the first 2 issues of the Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles crossover sequel, signed by one of my favorite current artists, Freddie Williams II. Next I have a bunch of Superman books signed by Dan Jurgens. I used to have all the individual issues of these books back in the 90s, but I sold most of that stuff when I was scrounging up money for a car, and now I'm slowly buying all that shit back. I reread all this stuff not too long ago, and I'll admit that the stories don't live up to the hype. but I have a lot of warm, fuzzy, nostalgic feelings for the death of Superman and the reign of the Supermen. And I don't think that anyone can deny that Dan Jurgens' pencils are outstanding. Now, don't judge a book by its cover, because this trade contains a bunch of really great, classic Superman stories. There's some of John Byrne's Man of Steel stuff. There's Tears for Titano, which was the basis for an episode of Superman, the animated series. And I really like this story in particular. This is called The Limits of Power. And this is essentially a ripoff of the Fantastic Four, but it's a horrific, gut-wrenching ripoff of the Fantastic Four that's definitely worth reading. This is the origin of Hank Henshaw, the cyborg Superman. And I'm almost certain you can find this trade paperback for next to nothing at your local comic book shop. I also got some things signed by Brian Azzarello. I'm not a massive fan of Azzarello's Batman, but when he gets it right, he really gets it right. The Flashpoint Batman story in this trade is one of my all-time favorite Batman stories. And this is a collection of stories written by Brian Azzarello and drawn by Eduardo Risso. This is called Batman Noir. The artwork is left uncolored, and I think it's really striking. I really wish that DC would put Eduardo Risso on a regular, ongoing Batman book. And I would like to track down more comics by Eduardo Risso, and I would like to pick up more of these black and white noir books too. Here we have The Dark Knight Returns, The Last Crusade, and the first issue of Dark Knight 3, The Master Race, both signed by Azzarello. I have more books that I could have had signed, but I think he was charging $5 a pop, so I whittled it down to just a few. Next up is the first issue of Nick Spencer's Astonishing Ant-Man, signed by cover artist Mark Brooks. I love this series, and I have the entire run, but again, he was charging to sign books, so I had to be selective. If you're like me and you haven't read a lot of Ant-Man comics, this is really accessible for new readers, and it's a ton of fun. Then I have the complete Vader Down series, signed by Mark Brooks also. This was a crossover event that went for 6 issues across Marvel's Star Wars and Darth Vader titles. This was pretty kick-ass, and I think that Mark Brooks really nails the likenesses on all the actors. This is an autographed 8x10 signed by Kevin Conroy. He was the voice of Batman in the animated series, the Arkham video games, and a bunch of other animated movies and shows. He's the only actor who portrays Bruce Wayne's voice as the fake voice. Adam West, Michael Keaton, Val Kilmer, and George Clooney basically use the same voice whether or not they're in the Batsuit. Christian Bale's Batman voice was manipulated by sound editing to make him sound more gravelly, and Ben Affleck uses a gruff voice when he's in the Batsuit too. But Kevin Conroy's version of Batman uses his real voice, and Bruce Wayne is the phony voice he puts on when he's not in costume as Batman. I think that was a stroke of genius. While I was waiting in line for this autograph, he climbed up on his chair and did this "I am vengeance, I am the night, I am Batman" quote from the animated series. Of course, I only got to talk to him for a minute or two, but he was cool as hell, and I'm thrilled I was able to get this photo with him. Next is the complete Batman 66 Green Hornet crossover miniseries, signed by interior artist Ty Templeton. This series was written by Kevin Smith and Ralph Garman, who you may have seen on Hollywood Babylon, and every issue has an amazing cover by Alex Ross. This is a paperback collection of the first 6 issues of Batman Adventures, which was a comic book series based on Batman the Animated Series. I picked this up when my local comic book shop went out of business. I think the owner was holding this back with intentions of selling it on eBay. So I don't know if this is rare or not, but I've never seen this particular trade until I bought it. Even though I already have most of the comics that are contained in this volume, I bought it anyway because I really love this wraparound cover by Ty Templeton. Ty Templeton handles the art duties on the first story arc of the Batman Adventures. And reading this as a kid was the first time I became aware of him. But he's done lots of really great work for DC and Marvel. Case in point is this really nice hardcover collection of a Spider-Man Human Torch team-up miniseries, written by Dan Slott. You've already heard me talk about how much I like Dan Slott's writing, and combined with Ty Templeton's throwback-style artwork, this book is a lot of fun. The best part, though, is that Ty Templeton did this quick little half-Spidey, half-Human Torch sketch inside the cover. Guys like Dan Jurgens and Ty Templeton could charge for autographs, but instead they were asking for donations to a charity that supports aging comic book creators, to which I gladly donated to. I got the majority of my Frank Cho comics signed several years ago at a Spectrum art show, but unfortunately Frank Cho didn't have any prints of his artwork for sale, so I made sure to pick up some prints from him at Planet Comic Con this year. I really like this Harley Quinn print in particular. It seems like a combination of the modern comic book style Harley Quinn and the Margot Robbie Suicide Squad movie Harley Quinn. I'm a big sucker for Harley Quinn, and her original costume is still my favorite, so I had to buy this print. I think this image was used for a variant Harley Quinn comic book cover. Frank Cho was running a deal on prints where you could buy one for $20 or three for $40. So I also picked up this Wonder Woman print. I think Frank Cho's line work is incredible here, and I really like this Amazon motto, "Seek peace, prepare for war." I also got these two comics signed by current Batman writer Tom King. David Finch wasn't at Planet Comic-Con, but I got these signed by him at Kansas City Comic-Con back in November. And Tom King was cool as fuck. He was chatting with everyone and seemed genuinely excited to be there and happy to meet his fans. I don't really care for the way he writes Batman. In fact, I stopped reading all the current ongoing Bat titles. You may have heard me refer to this as Afterbirth. However, it seems really popular and a lot of people like it a lot, so I hope that they continue to be successful, and maybe I'll pick up a trade if I hear about a story arc that sounds like it might be more up my alley. If you've seen any of my other videos about comic books or Comic-Con hauls, then you've probably heard me gush about Jason Aaron. Jason Aaron is one of my favorite comic book writers, and he just so happens to live in the area, so he always shows up at local comic book conventions. These are a couple of recent issues of the Mighty Thor that I had signed. I absolutely loved Jason Aaron's Wolverine and the X-Men, and I've been reading his Mighty Thor since the very beginning, around the time that the first Thor movie came out. If you're interested in checking this out, then I highly recommend it. And if you happen to see Jason Aaron, offer to buy him a beer. Just like Frank Cho, I got all my Dave Dorman stuff signed at that Spectrum Art Show several years ago. And also, just like Frank Cho, Dave Dorman didn't have any prints available at that show. So when he showed up at Planet Comic-Con this year, I made sure to pick up some prints of his artwork. This is an image of Indiana Jones that was used for a Dark Horse comic book cover. This is the cover art for the Dark Horse Star Wars Dark Empire issue number 2. And to be honest, Dark Empire is not one of my favorite Star Wars comics, but this is a very striking image, and Dave Dorman really nailed the likeness of Mark Hamill. And finally, my favorite of the three is this image of Princess Leia in the Bausch bounty hunter costume, about to rescue Han Solo from the Carbonite block. And the likeness to Carrie Fisher is amazing, and I'm really thrilled to have this print in my collection now. Next we have the complete Before Watchmen Ozymandias miniseries, signed by illustrator Jay Lee. Now, Ozymandias was never one of my favorite characters from the original Watchmen comics, and I wasn't particularly looking forward to this miniseries. I was mostly just buying it because I was buying all the rest of them. But after reading it, and stacking it up against the other Before Watchmen stories, this one turned out to be one of my favorites, due in no small part to the amazing artwork by Jay Lee. This year at Comic-Con, I also picked up this book, The Marvel Art of Arthur Adams. It's kind of hard to make out, but there's his signature right there. This book is about the same size as a coffee table book, so the images are large enough that you can see all the fine details. And in a lot of cases, you can see the original pencil drawing alongside the inked final version that was used for whatever comic book cover. And next to most of the images is a little behind-the-scenes info by Arthur Adams. A lot of these insights are very interesting, and some of them are pretty funny. I could spend hours looking at this book and wishing I could draw like Arthur Adams. I'm really happy to have it, and it was a real pleasure to get to meet him. And here is a signed 11 by 17 inch print by Arthur Adams of Jean Grey as Phoenix. Up next is my Alan Tudyk autograph. He played Wash in Firefly, K2SO and Rogue One, and he's been in a ton of other shows and movies like A Knight's Tale, 42, and Dodgeball, to name a few. I really enjoyed Rogue One, and I would have liked to have gotten a photo of K2SO signed as well, but he was charging $50, so I got a Firefly photo signed instead, because I have autographs from most of the members of the Serenity crew, and I think I could eventually get all the main cast members' autographs. Alan Tudyk was scheduled to be at the last 3 or 4 Planet Comic-Cons, but something always came up, and this was the first one he actually showed up for. So there was a shitload of people there, and this was probably the longest line I've ever had to wait in for an autograph. But when I finally made it to the front of the line, Alan Tudyk did not disappoint. He was really friendly and funny. I would have loved to chat him up and ask him questions about the show, but there were so many people there and I didn't want to hold up the line. Now sadly Ron Glass has passed away, so I'm not going to be able to get his autograph. But as it stands right now, I only need Zoe, Inara, and Mal to complete my Firefly autograph collection. Scott Snyder came to Planet Comic-Con in 2013 and 2014, and I got a lot of my Court of Owls and Death of the Family comics signed back then. He didn't charge for autographs either of those years, but at Planet Comic Con 2018, he and Greg Capullo were charging after the first 3 autographs. So I don't know what's changed. I would like to think that the convention promoters aren't compensating the creators as much as they used to, and that's why most of them have begun to charge for autographs to make appearing at the convention more worthwhile. But maybe they're just capitalizing on the popularity of the Dark Knight's Metal comics. Either way, I had to be more selective this year, choosing books and comics that I wanted to have autographed. So first off, we have Batman issues 13 and 14 from the Death of the Family story arc, and I chose these just because the covers are really cool looking. The Scott Snyder signatures on these are a few years old, but I had these signed by Greg Capullo and Jonathan Glapion, who did the inks on the Death of the Family, and the Court of Owls and City of Owls. Even though I wasn't really wild about Batman Endgame, I really like this cover a lot, so I decided to have it signed by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo as well. Jill Thompson was at Planet Comic Con this year too, so the last day of the con, when my wife went with me, I made sure she brought her copies of Beasts of Burden and Wonder Woman, the True Amazon. I've always been a big fan of Evan Dorkin's writing, Jill Thompson's artwork is always gorgeous, and my wife really likes animals. So I got this for her for our second Christmas together, trying to get her to become a comics reader. This is a really great read, especially if you need a break from capes and tights superhero comics. Since my wife liked Beasts of Burden so much, and the Wonder Woman movie, I ordered this for her a while back too. This is an original graphic novel, written and illustrated by Jill Thompson. I haven't read this yet, but my wife really enjoyed it. It looks great, and I'll definitely get around to reading it sometime soon. Here we have an 11 by 17 signed print of the cover art from the True Amazon Wonder Woman graphic novel that my wife picked out. And this is a Dark Knight Returns style Batman and Carrie Kelly Robin print that was also done by Jill Thompson. The Dark Knight Returns is my all-time favorite Batman story. In fact, I named my daughter Carrie after Carrie Kelly, because my wife wouldn't let me name her Robin. And I imagine that we'll hang these prints in my daughter's room someday. Here we have a couple of books that my wife bought me for Valentine's Day. This is the Love is Love anthology, spearheaded by comics writer Mark Andreyko, who's been on Screen Junkies a bunch of times, and I really like him a lot. All the proceeds from this book went to support victims from the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando, Florida. A ton of top-shelf creators contributed to this book, and mine is an 8th printing, so apparently it's been pretty popular, and hopefully it made lots of money for a good cause. Next is a really nice hardcover celebrating the 25-year anniversary of Harley Quinn. This collects a lot of stories by different creators who have worked on the character over the years. There's a lot of stuff here that I already have, but there's also a lot of stuff that I haven't read yet, so I'm excited to dig into this. I have a few of these celebration books, and they're really great. So I understand that my videos are probably really boring to you. I'm very long-winded. If you've made it this far, that makes you a fucking legend. And as a reward, here's the download code for a free digital copy of Star Wars The Last Jedi. Alright, so here's what you need to do. Download the free Movies Anywhere app or visit redeemdigitalmovie.com, enter the code provided by this porg here, and enjoy a free digital copy of Star Wars The Last Jedi on your friend OG Trilogy. Now this code is good for one use only, so if you're the one who redeems it, please leave a note in the comment section below so that other people don't waste their time. I think that's all for me today, so until next time, may the Force be with you. Bye.